Our job begins where most advisors stop. Saving money is great, but how do you spend it without risk in retirement? Welcome to Every Day is Saturday with Brad Gotto and Matt Stahl, partners and private wealth managers at Fiat Wealth Management. In this podcast, we aim to broaden your knowledge about the financial world we live in today and make the boring and complex financial decisions fun, informative, and educational. Join us on this journey where Brad and Matt will explore different strategies on how to spend your money without guilt and have peace of mind knowing you are spending it the optimal way in retirement.
Do all people actually need a financial advisor? Join us today as we talk about the 4 essential traits of a successful long-term investor and see if you can check all the boxes yourself. I'm Brad Gotto. I'm here with my partner, Matt Stahl of Fiat Wealth Management. And welcome to our podcast, Every Day is Saturday. Well, Matt, we laid it out. It's possible that not everybody needs us. And the 4 things that you and I talk about all the time that would define a person that may not actually need an advisor are the people that have the time to do it, the people that have the desire to do it, the discipline, and finally, the knowledge. So with that being said, let's break it down. Matt, this is a topic that you're pretty passionate about, and it's a topic that you kind of drive here at Fiat. So let's just break it down one by one. First of all, why are those the 4 things, do you think? And then let's start with time.
Yeah. Thanks, Brad. So in our experience, I'm coming up on 16 years in the industry here, and you're right there with me. And so we've had a lot of experience talking to different people. So this just isn't pulled out of thin air. This is what we found in our experience in having several conversations with different people. And what we found is that not everybody does need an advisor. But what we've nailed down are these 4 different things that a person would be the essential traits that person would want to have to be successful in managing their own finances. And the first one that you talked about is time.
Yeah. So let's dig into that one first.
Yeah.
And just kind of break these down one by one. And so time seems like kind of an obvious one. Some people may have the time, may not have the time, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So a great example, Brad, would be, the 2 of us. I coach soccer. I have 3 kids that are in activities. You coach baseball. We make choices on how we're going to allocate our time throughout the day. And the reality is we live in a fast-paced world right now, and things are changing constantly around us.
Yeah.
And we can either, we can either fight that or we can adapt. And from the time standpoint, a perfect example is, so we do have the new tax proposals that are out right now.
Yep.
That's a great example of something that if you don't take the time to keep up with those things, you will soon find yourself behind, and your plan that you laid out in the beginning isn't going to work any longer. So keeping up with those tax law changes, keeping up with the state law changes, it's just something important that requires time. And to be a real long-term successful investor, it's going to take time to do that.
So Matt, are you trying to say that, tax law changes, state law changes, market volatility isn't going to be top of mind and stuck in the important and urgent bucket for all people?
I know, speaking from experience, I know as soon as I leave the office today, there's going to be at least 8 to 9 things to get done before the end of the evening. And, depending on what stage of life you're in, we all have a lot to do today. And that's just the reality of things.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about it, because as a financial advisor, it's one of those things where I think everybody thinks you and I have all of our finances in order at all times because this is what we do for a living. It's like thinking a car salesman has the nicest car on the street, or, that a general contractor has the nicest house on the block, and there's no projects to be done because he's a general contractor. But whether it's the complex things like you talked about, or something a lot more simple, like balancing my budget every single month and paying attention to every expense coming in the door, it's tough. Absolutely. And a lot of things take priority over that, because at the end of the day, it's not exactly fun for everybody to be going through these things. And we tend to prioritize based on obviously importance, but then also the things that we just like to do, right?
Absolutely. And an additional thing is when you're talking about a couple, that makes things that much more complicated. So if it was just myself, I may have an idea of what my budget's going to be, but the fact of the matter is when you have a family and there's a whole nother person thrown in the mix,
Yeah.
it's just not if I get a date night to go out with my wife, Katie, that's not at the top of the list of what we necessarily want to talk about. So we want to catch up on how our week was, things we didn't get to, necessarily talk about. And fact of the matter is, our money's not going to jump to the top of the list every time we're going to have that conversation.
Yeah. Well, that actually kind of bleeds into the second one, which is desire. But before we jump into that, just kind of tie a bow on this whole time issue. I think, Matt, really what it comes down to is we may have the best of intentions, relative to staying on top of these sorts of things. But I guess my experience, and I'll let you speak to it a little bit too, with most of the people that we deal with, where if this is one of the four things that they struggle with, is finding the time to be proactive with all things financial in their life, where we can add value. It's just having somebody that's kind of forcing their hand to be looking at these things. If nothing else, just having a visit on the calendar that
Absolutely.
is coming, right? Like I got to meet with Matt, or I got to meet with Brad in a month. And because of that, it kind of forces you to look into the things that you're supposed to be looking into, or that we asked you to look into. But from my experience, that's probably one of the biggest reasons that people hire us, is they just don't have the time to do it.
Absolutely. And just a funny little side note with that, I often have been told, several times I found myself watching clients argue with one another, not in a combative way, but in a healthy, constructive way. And they tell me that, hey, this is their time set aside to talk about money, and like it or not, you're going to be part of this conversation. So.
It's a really good point. And if they listen to this, they'll know who they are. I have a client that I bet it was over a year that it was a boat conversation. Do we get a boat? Do we not get a boat? Do we get a boat? Do we not get a boat? And it was a bit of a counseling session. And actually the last year they decided to do a boat club. That was kind of the compromise. One spouse wanted a boat, one didn't. And so they basically became part of a club, and
Perfect.
For all intents and purposes, rented one for a year. Now this year they ended up buying the boat. So, but that kind of dominated our conversations for a while. So I guess I never thought of it that way, that they were using those visits as their time to talk all things financial. But I guess now that you say it, you're right.
Absolutely.
Well, we kind of bled into it, Matt, but this whole idea of desire. So of the four things, number one was time. Now we're on number two, desire. Talk to me a little bit about what you mean by that.
Absolutely. So Brad, desire for me personally, in my experience, does go hand in hand with time. But the desire piece is, do you actually have the sustainable interest to stay on top of all those things? And I don't know about you, and I don't know about everybody else, but I have a lot of hobbies. I certainly don't have a lack of hobbies.
Yeah.
And what I find myself doing often is I'll get really interested in a particular subject for a period of time, and then my interest just kind of wanes after a bit. And that's okay if it's, baking bread or making sauerkrauts or something along those lines.
Making sauerkraut.
Yeah.
That's your example?
Absolutely. That's not something I've done, but I'd like to.
Okay.
It's on the to-do list, the to-do list. And
yeah.
But when it comes to something like your family's future, if my kids are going to go to college, or that's a bigger deal than learning how to make some sauerkraut, in my opinion anyway. So
you and the four other people in the planet that want to learn how to make sauerkraut.
No. There's a lot more than that. But the desire piece is really, each of us as an individual, we talk about this a lot within our organization, is how do we find our people's superpower within our organization?
Yeah.
We don't all know that. Sometimes that's the path of self-discovery that we find. But the fact of the matter is, if it's not something that's of interest to you, you can force it for a little while, but it's not going to stick. So if it's not something that's truly part of your nature, like it or not, it's something that, whether yourself or an advisor that works with you, there's got to be someone that's interested in that is going to keep up to date with everything and ensure everything's running smoothly.
Yeah. Well, and I think even past interest, Matt, to your point that you made earlier, it has to go even beyond interest. You got to be more than interested in it. It's got to be something that you actually have the desire to do. Because, you may have interest in making sauerkraut, but that doesn't mean you're going to become a professional sauerkraut maker or want to do it more than once. It may sound fun once or twice, but kind of like I have a lot of things in my life that we all have lists, right? Of things we know we need to get to.
Right.
And, whether it's cleaning your closets or getting the oil changed in the car or whatever it may be. And I think the point that you're trying to make here is that's great because cleaning your closets can wait and eventually you can get to it. But this is one of those things, your financial life that if you don't stay on top of it, unlike cleaning your closet, it can actually cause a lot of pain down the road.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You said it best.
The desire for me is a big one. I think that when I think through the kind of our clients that we have now, most of them, I don't know that most of them have the desire. It's just not a super, people don't think about this idea of the mundane of investment portfolio decisions to RMD planning, to tax planning, to income distribution ideas for their paycheck in retirement. Don't get all excited or jazzed up about hours and hours of research, let alone maintenance as we go.
Right. There's so many more fun things to do out there in the world for some of those people that are interested in other things. I should have given a better example than making sauerkraut. How about surfing?
Well, nobody's going to forget it. That's for sure. Well, the third one, Matt, is discipline.
Yeah.
And so talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Brad, this is actually one of them that came as the biggest surprise to me. So, and I'm going to give you a real life example of this. I had a longtime client who was just a brilliant investor, very good with his money. He was a single gentleman and he definitely had the time. He was retired. He didn't have a lot of obligations.
Mm-hmm.
He spent this time as he chose to. He definitely had the trait that we're going to be talking about next. So there wasn't a lack there. And the desire was there. He was very interested in everything investing and everything financial planning. So finally, I just asked him one day and said, "Hey, I feel like when you come in to see me, you already have a plan mapped out and you already have a lot of ideas. So why in the heck do you work with us?" Because I want to make sure that we're providing you value and, in exchange that you're receiving that. And
it's kind of a scary question.
So what's that?
Kind of a scary question, because what if he hadn't thought of that himself? What if his answer would have been, you know what, now that you say it,
well,
I don't know why I work with you.
That's a great point, Brad. I think it's a lose-lose over the long term. If eventually he would have come to that realization
sure
himself. Right.
Yeah.
And
yep.
So I would rather ask that question out of the gate and ensure we have a harmonious long-term relationship. So I just asked him and his answer was super simple and it didn't take him long to answer me. And he said, "Simple. You keep me from doing something stupid." So, and that comes back to the discipline piece. So, Warren Buffett has a quote about being fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful.
Sure.
So Brad, we've talked about this for years. One of our roles that we play for clients often is helping them balance fear and greed. And that comes down to having the discipline to not make a silly decision that's going to derail your entire plan based on either fear or greed. And
yep.
this is more prevalent than ever with, the whole GameStop scene this particular year, cryptocurrency, just all the different things that are out there.
Yep.
How important it is to stay disciplined and balance that greed and fear. Because guess what? We're going to have another major event and there's going to be another market correction.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen again and again. So it's ever more important with all the distractions that are around us in this fast-paced world that we have that discipline to stick to our own plan.
Well, and it's tough, even in our shoes, right? I have got buddies that have gotten into the cryptocurrency game and it's discussed pretty regularly in our group texts and conversations. And it's hard for me, even as an advisor, to stay disciplined, right? We all have the fear of missing out. We all want, the next best thing or the best rates of return if we can get them. And it's tough to stay disciplined. And Matt, I can think of multiple times where you've had big financial decisions to make in life, or I've had, and we've gone to the other person and used each other as a sounding board just to make sure that we're actually staying disciplined and not making decisions based out of either fear or greed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what it comes down to is, well, as an investment manager that helps us, it's having some sort of framework. So it's easy to execute a plan when everything's going the way that you planned. It's when things go south, it's when it's really important that you have some sort of system and framework to know what to do. And so there's nothing wrong with investing in cryptocurrency, but what is your strategy? What kind of rules have you placed around that? And that's the role that we end up playing for several people, is just helping them create rules-based investing and financial planning.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't help but think of health and exercise, working out, whatever you want to call it. For me personally, this is where this is the most real in my life, is that it's not a default setting for me. Some people like you just love to work out and it's like part of who they are. I'm not one of those people, although I know I need to do it. I should do it. It's good for me, all the things. I have to have people in my life constantly keeping me accountable to it to help me create the discipline that I need in order for that consistency to be there. And I can look back on the seasons of my life where I've been most successful in that, in my health, my diet, my exercise, and point specifically to the people that were investing in my life with me, walking the path with me, however you want to put it. And then the seasons where, like when COVID started and I lost my workout buddies because they couldn't come over to my house anymore, and it immediately waned or fell off, and how tough that was. So discipline's tough. And for somebody like me that doesn't come naturally, I don't just get all jazzed up about exercising all the time. Without that discipline and having kind of that guide or those other people investing in me, it just doesn't last long term. And for a lot of people, that's finances, because this is
absolutely,
it's tough. It's tough.
Well, we've had the conversation about having a coach, and even the world's top performers, the consistent theme you see across the board is they have a coach. And you say, we've talked about Tiger Woods with golf. How in the world would he need a coach? But even someone at that top level in any facet, whether it's sports or business or whatever it may be, a coach is going to help them stay accountable and stay disciplined to what they say that they want to accomplish. And that's really, when it comes down to it, that's one of the roles we do end up playing.
Yeah. This game, it reared its head, so to speak, at the beginning of COVID, when the markets got super volatile and dropped 30% in 30 days. That discipline with the clients that we have, and having those conversations about rules-based investing, rules-based financial planning, and making sure that we set things up in a way that there are these set of rules, so that when those severe cases happen, like that correction that happened last year, that we don't have clients, that are fearful or reaching out and saying, gosh, did we plan for this? Do we have something for this? What's on your board for pandemics? But I don't know about you, Matt. I think I had one client actually reach out with a phone call, because the rest of them knew that we had that discipline. We had that rule-based system in place that you discussed earlier.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, the last one's knowledge. This could go a lot of ways, but tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah. This is a passion of mine in general. I talk often about, we're all drowning in information. We're surrounded by information. You can go on the internet or anywhere around you to find information about just about anything you want.
Yeah.
The real issue that I see is there's a huge lack of wisdom. So if I put myself in the shoes of someone who, say that I'm retiring today and I have this pile of money that I'm going to create a paycheck for. And if I put myself in those shoes and I just go jump on the internet, I'm going to be one confused person because over here, I'm going to read that this particular strategy is the greatest thing in the world. And then I'm going to read this next page that says it's the worst thing. And that's going to go on and on and on and on. So the knowledge piece is having a trusted source that has the experience and the perspective that can explain what is all this and how does it apply to me, or how does it not? And I think that's something that's of such need in so many areas today, especially when it comes to money, because we just did an internal workshop, just all the confusing things out there that you can find if you begin searching investing or, how do I make money? Well, there's infinite ways to do it these days. How do you have focus and focus on what is actually essential and what makes sense to your scenario?
Yeah. Even though it's 2021 and the internet is what it is, man, I still get a lot of that lack of knowledge or bad information from neighbors, family members, friends. It's always the same. Like, well, I did this,
right?
Or this is what I'm doing. And unfortunately, everybody's situation is different. And if you're taking your advice from your neighbor, or you're taking your advice from your best friend or your brother or sister or whoever it may be, and it sounds like really good advice, and it could be for them.
Right. Exactly.
But it could be absolutely terrible advice for you based on your situation and what you're doing.
Absolutely. That's one thing I like to say is I try not to speak in yous, which means you should do this or you should not do that, or because like you just said, I just said you, like you just said, everybody is different. So that's where it's important that you have someone on your side that has the perspective to see all sides of these different things, to truly articulate what makes sense for you and what does not. And that right there, I think, is one of the most important pieces of having some sort of professional or advisor that's in your corner.
Yeah. I think just to give a real life example, Matt, we've got clients that we do a lot of tax planning for. And inside of that, I've got clients that last year we were moving money around from a tax perspective and generated income purposefully on over 6 figures of investable assets. And then we've got other clients that we generated zero. We did nothing because their situations, although both retired, although both living on similar amounts of money, their situation was just so different in the nuances or in the details that one person were moving 6 figures of money around and generating a huge tax bill, and one person were doing, like I said before, absolutely nothing. Whereas you go online, you can find an article that will support both sides of that. Right. And vehemently, and use words like always and never.
Right. Yep.
If I could give one piece of practical advice here, is if you're reading an article on anything financial and it uses the word always or never, just go to the next article.
You should always, you should never.
Right. So let's break this down, or I guess recap it would be a better way to put it. So we started off by asking the question, does everybody actually need an advisor? So really what we're saying here, Matt, is if you've got the time, you've got the desire to do it, you've got the discipline to stick with it, and you've got the knowledge, that you may not need us, correct?
Absolutely. And we say that often, we're not for everybody, and neither is any other advisor or organization. What we found through experience is a majority of the people that we do have conversations with, as they begin to search and think about this, they realize, you know what, I might have 3 of the 4, but I'm missing that 4th.
Yeah.
And I've run into people that have all 4. It's not a majority of the people that I run into out there, though.
Yeah. Well, I think the important thing to note here, like you said before, is one, not everybody does need an advisor. You may want one, right? There's a difference between want and need. Some people maybe have those four things, but I've ran into situations too, Matt, where they may have all four, but it's maybe the husband's driving those four things, or maybe it's the wife
Right.
that's driving those four things. And their concern isn't necessarily for them and their life. It's for, well, what if something does happen to me? Right? Because if I may have these things, but my spouse does not.
Right.
And so how do I start planning now, or who do I put in my corner and start building that trust while I'm alive, so that there is a confidant for my spouse that doesn't have one of the four, two of the four, maybe none of them at that point in time.
Absolutely. And Brad, as you know, that's a conversation we find ourselves having more and more.
Yeah.
Just recently.
Yeah. Well, wrapping up, Matt, I think that it's just important for everybody to understand that we know, and we want you to know, that not everybody should be paying for advice, just like not everybody should have a golf coach, or not everybody needs to learn how to make sauerkraut. I don't know.
I don't know. I think everybody does.
I don't even like sauerkraut. So the idea of spending time learning how to make it does not sound fun to me. I want everybody out there to understand that it is important to think through this. And before, if you're out there looking for an advisor or contemplating if you need one or not, I think one of the things that would be very beneficial is to sit down with yourself or your spouse, if you're married, and just ask yourself that question. Which one of these four things am I looking for? Or is it multiple things? And use that in your search when you're making your decision, because not every advisor specializes in one thing or the other. You know, if you think, if time, as an example, is something that you lack, maybe the advisor service model isn't such that it's going to be able to take a lot of things off your plate. You know, maybe they have kind of a low bar for service, and it's a once a year visit kind of thing, and that's all you get. And so that's maybe not the right advisor if time is your problem, you know,
Right.
or even discipline. Because if they're not going to be there to kind of check in with you and be more of a coach, right? Then, and they're more of just kind of a transactional based advisor, that's probably, again, not the advisor that you want, right?
Right. Absolutely. And well, desire and knowledge, I think, speak for themselves. So those are going to be prerequisites to finding a great advisor relationship regardless.
So if somebody's listening to this, Matt, and they're thinking, okay, well, this makes sense. Well, what does Fiat do? Where does Fiat kick into these four? Okay, you know, what's your approach? What does it look like? We like to say we have a CFO approach. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing we find ourselves talking to clients about, well, first off, you run into so many people out there that will call themselves an advisor. You could run into an
Sure.
insurance salesperson down the street that puts financial advisor on their business card. And as you start having that conversation with them, you realize they only have one tool in their toolkit. I would argue that's not really providing that advice.
Sure.
And so the easiest way we've found to explain this to clients is we act as their family's CFO. They're still the CEO. They're still making all the decisions. We are acting as a CFO. So we're giving them all the options, showing them the optional paths, showing them which ones appear to make the most sense for them. They're ultimately making the decision. And that explanation is what we found clicks with most people.
Yeah. In saying that, Matt, I think it's important to say what we're not. And what we're not is a stockbroker, right? We don't work with people that just want kind of stock tips or just investment advice. We're not just insurance people. We're not transactional, typically, where we're going to just write a life insurance policy on somebody or something like that and not have that type of relationship. That's just not the type of clients that we tend to work with. We want to work with the clients that want that CFO. They want to offload kind of all things financial in their life, and not to the point where they don't get to make those decisions. I mean, you made the point earlier, Matt, they're still the CEO. The buck still stops with them. But at the end of the day, they want somebody else handling the guidance, the recommendations, the education, the staying on top of things. And that's kind of the way we view ourselves as that CFO.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that kind of wraps it up. If you're listening to this, what I hope that you've got from this episode is that you may actually be one of those people that just does not need an advisor. So we get that question all the time is, well, I don't know why I would need an advisor. I don't know what you can or cannot do for me. Well, I'd encourage you to just focus in on those 4 words. Do you have the time to do it? Do you have the desire to do it? Do you have the discipline to stay the course? And then do you have the knowledge to be able to make the decisions that you're going to need to be able to make as your life goes on? And if you do, maybe you actually don't need us or any advisor for that matter. If you lack one of those 4, finding an advisor that specializes in that area is going to be able to take whatever it is off of your plate that you lack or just quite frankly don't want to do. Because I find myself, Matt, in some of these categories, I may have the time, doesn't mean I want to do it, right? So with that said, thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us for this episode. We hope that you tune in every 2 weeks. If you have not yet subscribed to our podcast, we'd love it if you do. If you leave us a review, go ahead and hit that like button. We'd appreciate that as well. That's the end of today's episode. We hope to see you next Saturday.
But we don't record a podcast on Saturday.
Yeah, but Matt, every day is Saturday.
Thank you for listening to Every Day is Saturday. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Fiat Wealth Management or Foundation's investment advisors. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.